to Mediocre Gay, the podcast with David Ian and Kate Dale.
The show that plumbs the depths of mediocrity, celebrates the ordinary, and enjoys the everyday.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mediocre Gay, the podcast. I'm David Ian.
And I'm Kate Dale.
And what have you done this week, or found out this week that's super mediocre,
Well,
Kate?
David, I'm glad you asked me that because I've been doing some more research and
You're
doing
glad
some
I
more
asked
work. Yes.
Well, otherwise, what would we be doing?
What we do. Right. So I was really interested, and I feel this is the power of our podcast is already impacting on the outside world, which is quicker than I expected. But John Lewis released some research this week in their consumer spending reports, and apparently their big focus now and what consumers are really wanting now is it's not about the big and extraordinary anymore. What they're wanting is just everyday moments of joy, which I feel is very much what we're talking about. So
you think we have influenced the marketing department of John Lewis?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to hear what trends expert Michelle Ogden-Dillon...
What expert?
She's a trends expert. I don't know how one becomes a trends expert. I don't think we're going to be asked.
I don't think we're anywhere near.
No.
Go on.
Apparently there is a growing appreciation that we can buy a beautiful candle and sit outside with friends and we don't need to be on a beach in Marbella.
She doesn't live in London, does she?
She doesn't live in London because I think I would like to be on a beach in Marbella.
You don't want to sit outside with a candle in London.
I also don't want to spend 80 quid on a candle, to be honest.
So what? That's what they're calling every day, is sitting outside
well,
with a
that's
candle.
That's what experts, trends experts are. But they've also been looking at the way that they organise the department. So it's going to be around moments and themes and theory and things that you can do to just bring a bit of everyday joy to your family and to your daily existence, rather than it being about big experiences. For example, it's like having a nice dinner service with your dinner. It's about having people round to watch Netflix parties, apparently.
Do you know what? I'm slightly offended, and I did not think I would be, but I'm slightly offended that a store like John Lewis, which sells expensive items, is trading on the everyday idea. That's not every day for most people.
It's incredibly privileged. Also, they had their ups and downs. Do you want to know what's hot and what's not and what's going up in terms of sales?
I guess.
Because this is coming out of lockdown as well. So occasion hats are now, there's been a big growth in occasion hats.
Oh, come on, this is not occasion hats.
Yep. Changing robes, particularly the ones for if you're going outdoor swimming, you have to spend a ridiculous amount of money now.
What is a changing robe?
It's like a big towel, but it's a robe that when you're doing your wild swimming, because it's not swimming outdoors, it's wild swimming now, remember, it's been rebranded, that you then get into your mega expensive branded dry robe to help you get dry. I know.
None of this is sounding even remotely everyday. I don't go wild swimming. I don't need a special robe to get changed in. What you're describing sounds like a large dressing gown.
It is. Champagne flutes and glasses.
No, not every day.
Boyfriend jeans.
I'd need a boyfriend.
Women's blazers.
More likely.
Smart menswear.
Where are you wearing this? We're all working from home.
Well, no, you see, we're not now. And
this is going down.
No, this is going up. This is us coming out. I'm going to get to the going down. Wired bras are back.
No comment.
Laptop bags. And ironing boards. This very much feels like a list from the 50s. It's just putting women back into servitude while we're all trussed up with our... Yeah.
I just don't iron. I get you to do my ironing.
I did it once. And that was a
That was the last time I had anything that was ironed.
I know. I just suddenly sound like I'm in sort of weird coercive relationship, which I'm worried is what this sounds like anyway. Just me being a nice friend. Do you want to know what's going down, David?
Yeah.
Stop writing your own joke. It's not that sort of podcast. Jigsaws.
Oh, the Queen played a lot of jigsaws.
Well, there you go. But you see, now that we're coming out of lockdown, we don't need to produce jigsaws anymore. Velour tracksuits are going down.
God.
Bread bins because we've stopped making sourdough. Non-wired bras. Microwaves.
Can I ask about the bra situation?
Yeah.
If there's no
wire... I'm wearing one, but that's a weird...
goodness. If there's no wire... So the wire is to keep it up. So if there's no wire, how do they...
Elastic and straps. And there's a whole thing about how up should they be anyway. That's very much forgetting. I mean, there's we could... Yeah.
Just tuck them in.
Well, mine's swinging obviously around by my knees at my age now anyway. I can tie them in a bow. But it's how perky should they be? Because they're just lumps of fat at the end of the day that some men get weirdly upset. I quite like them as well. Anyway, microwaves down. Soup makers.
Now, why would microwaves be down? I was reading the other day about the whole thing that we're supposed to be using microwaves more because it's so much more energy efficient. So with the price of fuel and whatever, it's going to be cheaper to cook your potato in a
Yeah, we're all going out, I think. But then this is probably pre-recession. Yeah. Suit makers. And they're no longer selling, and this is controversial, these wall-mounted desks. They've deleted them from the catalogue. I know, I didn't even quite understand that there was such a thing as a wall-mounted desk.
Why is that controversial, and
It's
why
not
have they deleted
controversial. I
them?
was just trying to make it sound more interesting than it actually is.
On that note, we've got a guest.
Yes.
Stand-up comedian from Surrey.
He's a writer. He writes video games for a living.
I cannot tell you.
He's a man. He is here. He will talk.
It was really difficult not to do it in that accent that you do, not to give away one of your
Were you
jokes.
trying to steal one of his
Podcast
jokes?
is like, he's a beautiful person. I think there's an up-and-coming comedian who everyone sold out show.
I know,
I'm
it's just like
this is a man from
This is
Surrey.
a guy from Surrey. This is a really fantastic stand-up comedian who's also a professional writer who did take money from J.K. Rowling.
I have to tell people to give me compliments, it seems.
So, welcome, Michael Cumes!
It is lovely to be here. Lovely to wherever we are.
Do you want to do a better introduction for who you are and what your background is, rather than that car crash that I just did?
No, that was the best one I could do. I would just like, I'm quite
Otherwise, it will be your set, won't
so
it?
Just like he's
Do you want me to write your Tinder profile?
My Tinder profile is I can't remember what I have on it. I have like it's really self-deprecating. Am I supposed to be speaking into
Yeah,
this
just so that
microphone?
people can hear you.
I thought they were so sort of like high tech that they can pick me up
You
from
just
the other
speak
side.
very quietly.
Oh, do I? It's because I don't want to take up space.
Obviously.
I'm afraid of taking up
And you're a
space.
stand-up comedian?
I am a stand-up comedian, and so I think that's bringing us on to being mediocre. That's the really interesting thing. I think is that sometimes you're either at the extreme. I'm at the extremes all the time. Either I'm the greatest person that's ever lived, or I'm awful.
What you're describing is manic.
Yes, that's the thing. I am. All
right, so before we get into whatever this is,
I brought my trauma.
Tell us what you do. What does mediocre mean to you? What do you define as mediocre? What do you define mediocre as?
Genuinely, I mean, I've been thinking about. Yeah, I think I might disagree with everyone else you've had on because I think it just means boring. I really hate it. I hate the term. I don't think it's. I can understand that sort of like etymologically it is average and it means kind of like in the middle, but I don't really believe necessarily in it. Like I think for me it's a negative term for being sort of like boring and it's connected with fear. Like trying to be mediocre is trying to sort of like hide away and be sort of and not be kind of what's the word. And not stick out. It's about
I think
it's about fear.
I think you pretty much do agree with.
No, because I feel like it's like I don't think of it like in a positive. I feel like everyone's been quite positive about it's okay to be mediocre. It's okay to be that, and I actually just think it's not okay. But
I think what you're saying, like, there's a security in being mediocre. I think Jeremy and I spoke about that before. It's about not taking up too much space. I said it's very much about like lower expectations. And I think when I describe myself as the mediocre gay, it's really about like controlling people's expectations around me. I think we're on similar pages. What do you love? Sorry.
And but what I'm getting from that is that, which I think would be the same for you as well, but if it was an epithet, if that's the right word, or a word that was applied to you, it would feel like an insult and it would be something that you would...
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think.
And it would be possibly one of your worst fears.
Maybe, yeah. No, to be boring, that is probably the worst thing. I always said if you can't be happy, try and be interesting, which is not a good motto to live by.
Which one are you?
Oh, well, no, it's like I don't think I'm happy, so I've always tried to be interesting. That sounds really sad. But it's like
I feel like we need a button for a medical health professional.
I know. I'm suddenly realising I was expecting counselling.
I've always wanted to be interesting. I don't want I've always wanted to try and do the interesting thing or to try and be a more exciting person. Probably because I just don't necessarily think that I am. Ooh, maybe I haven't thought deep enough about this.
So we think you're interesting.
Good.
We spend a lot of time talking about you.
Oh.
Well, mainly David. No,
just like it's all just like, how can we help him?
Yeah, we're always psychoanalyzing you. You're mad as a box of frogs.
Yeah, I really am.
What do you like that's mediocre?
I thought a lot about things because there are lots of things which are kind of like mainstream and boring, which I really enjoy. But I couldn't because the things that I really get passionate about, I just can't see as mediocre. So it was really, really hard. I was going to talk about I had loads of ideas. I was going to talk about loads of films, which I think are really boring, like Sliding Doors and Duets, mainly Gwyneth Paltrow movies. Really mediocre film career. And I was going to talk about Javine. I thought about Javine a lot because I was really into one of her songs.
Wow.
The music career of Minnie Driver was one of the options. She had a music career.
Did she? I love Minnie Driver.
She had one song and I really loved it.
Is one song a career?
I think it was like an album and she tried to make it work and it didn't work. And I think she's fabulous. Anyway, but I decided to talk about Gatwick Airport.
So what you actually did was give us a quick tour of your pop culture references.
I just really because Gatwick Airport's really like is I don't have much to say about it. I only have personal experiences. So
okay, why do you?
I just wanted to get Javine in there. To be quite honest with you, I've got a lot of time.
Should be grateful.
Yeah.
Is Gatwick Airport mediocre? I quite like Gatwick Airport. I really like the new branding for Gatwick Airport.
I haven't seen.
I think I always thought of it as quite it's like really, it's a bland thing. Airports are bland and boring. Like there's no, you can't, people aren't gonna, no one's gonna take a bullet for Stansted.
Terminal 5 at Heathrow is kind of white and shiny and exciting, and it feels like.
Oh, you see, Heathrow can go fuck itself. I have no
but Terminal 5, which is the BA one, and it's the new one, and it's in much better shape, so you're not walking for miles and miles and miles. And
it's not mediocre.
Here's the thing. I think that when Gatwick was owned by British Airports Association, BAA, the same people that owned Heathrow and a number of others, I think it was quite boring. And now, a few years ago, it was bought out by more of an independent organisation, like some sort of trust.
How do you know this?
Because I
had to, because in 2008, the competition board was saying, "Oh, it's a monopoly."
Right.
It's not interesting, but it's true.
But since it was no longer part of the group, I think it's become quite an interesting place. It's got a bit of an identity. It feels different to the other airports.
Because in my heart of hearts, I know it is boring, but I think the whole point about this, I thought the mission was like, it's mediocre. It is boring, but I love it.
Well, that
is the mission.
Yeah.
But what do you love about it, and what is it that you think that people see as mediocre? Because I also, what you're getting confused about here is I also love it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love anything about sort of like the infrastructure or the I just love what it means. I mean, I grew up, also I have a really personal connection to it. I have all these stories about Gatwick because I grew up just down the road. So it was like in that very, very, very boring kind of like wasteland in the middle of the southeast.
The main area that's used for like car parks for us flying off.
Yeah. The main industry is just like duty free. That's where it's the major employer for like all the towns around there, and it's a really boring part of the world. And right in the middle, the only interesting thing in the middle of this place where I grew up is Gatwick Airport, and we kind of used to go there on trips as kids because it's like a really cheap. Well, it's free. It's like
I used to work at I spent a year after university working at a college for young people with special needs and visual difficulties in Redhill, and we used to take them on a night out to Gatwick.
Was it the Orpheus Centre?
No, Heatherset College. I don't think it's there anymore. It's between Redhill and Reigate.
Yeah, that's where my mum was.
Oh, really?
Do you know Brooklyn School?
Yes, I think, yeah.
That was where my mum worked. My mum was a deputy head at Brooklyn School. How weird!
I was a
realise
community service volunteer for a year and mucking around doing very badly. But yeah, we'd take the kids there and they'd bounce along the travellators, and it was just, It
was amazing. There was there's like a magical little train which goes.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. I think everything's kind of like, it's quite like we used to go and it was like a shopping centre, and they'd have these crazy shops, and like I was just
when you two were saying that you went trips, as in just to the airport, land side, not air side.
Yeah,
that is what you do. That's what
the travellators. The kids would bounce along the travellators.
We'd go like every year. I remember like if
we'd go every year instead of going on holiday.
We never went on holiday on a. I went on a plane for the first time on my own when I was like 14. So like,
why were you going on your own at 14?
No, it wasn't on my own. It was like on a school plane. Yes. But like, that's what I mean about the sort of like the magic of Gatwick was just kind of like I used to look at those screens and be like, oh my god, it's. I'm obsessed with geography and the
departure screens, and you just stand there and you think, I could just go anywhere, and I've never done it. I want to do it. So I'm just take my passport and a credit card or whatever, and just decide on a whim where to go.
And sometimes in the shop they'd ask you where are you flying to? Like when we'd go and buy something, like I'd buy like a birthday present or something in one of the shops in Gatwick when I was a kid, and they'd sort of like, oh, and where are you flying to today? And I'd be like, and I'd get to pick a country and just say I was going there. I'd like, I'm going to Brazil. And then I had this whole backstory. It's because this is what I mean. If you have, I mean, clearly you had a far more cosmopolitan, exciting upbringing than I did. But if you have quite a boring upbringing, like somewhere like Gatwick Airport becomes magical. And I have this deep-seated love.
I mean, I think
it.
Gatwick Airport is magical, but I just didn't realise that people went.
I'd forgotten. I remember going to, because I grew up in Carlisle, going to Newcastle Airport, which is tiny, and spending an afternoon there. My dad had business somewhere near there, so he dropped me and my sister. We were teenagers. We weren't like 5. There, and we just spent the afternoon there watching the planes taking off and things. It was really exciting.
We're approaching this from different angles because I find it exciting from like
going somewhere.
From 2 points of view, the going somewhere, but also like the logistical point of view. I remember when I was at primary school, with this really cool, what's one of those teachers who comes in temporarily?
Supply teacher.
A supply teacher. But we had him for like 3 months, Mr. Townsend. He played a guitar. And one of the projects that we worked on was that in our little village school, they were going to he had this idea they were going to build an airport. They weren't really, but we were organised into 2 teams, and one was for the airport and one was against. And like the 4 were like had to like plan out the airport and do all the plans and everything, and the other ones had to do that. Anyway, this took place over a month. Obviously, I was in charge of one of the groups building the airport. Clearly, I was a capitalist. But it like got me obsessed with like the logistics of airports, and I did like all this research into how they all worked and everything. So I'm excited about it from that point of view.
I thank you for clarifying that your village was not actually going to build an airport. I think that was important.
It always made me think that I would end up working in an airport. And my granddad actually worked at Gatwick. He was like passport control.
Oh,
it's always felt like the chippy little brother of Heathrow's big brother, hasn't it? And it's got an independent, more funky extent. I like that, yeah.
I feel like Heathrow is like this sort of like city wanker who's like who's going off to all these fabulous destinations all over the world, and Stansted's like a spoiled brat, spotty teenager. Shiny thing. And then Gatwick is kind of like a sort of like a lovely lady who's gone back to work for the social life, as opposed to like it's like a real hard worker who's there to chat.
You should work in their marketing department.
Well, this is the thing, like, because everyone's mums at my college and stuff worked at Gatwick. Like, it's just every time I fly in there, I'm just like, oh, I wonder if I'll see anyone, because I used to sleep there as well. Like
what?
Because Gatwick is the only.
Are you describing abuse?
No, when I was older. So I'll explain if you. If I
don't interrupt.
Good luck with that.
The listeners at home. No, there's like a. It's basically because the Gatwick Express runs all night. And it's the only train out of London which runs all night, except the Heathrow Express, which is like 20 quid. So, because I grew up really near Gatwick, I used to go out in London when I was like a teenager. And the clubs would all kick you out at like 2 a.m. And the options were wait at Victoria or London Bridge for the first train home, or get the Gatwick Express to Gatwick. So I would, smart. And often I was one of these people who would just be like, I'm bored, goodbye, and then I just sort of bounce out of wherever I was. So I often would sort of find myself alone in London at like 2 a.m. being like, okay, I need to go somewhere. So I'd go down to Gatwick and sleep there.
So that Tom Hanks film. It's basically based on you.
I mean, they're trying to stop people doing that, so they put sort of like railings in between the remember they used to have those long, beautiful sort of like benches which you could sleep on. They put sort of like railings in between, but they didn't realise that I was really skinny, so I could get in between them and still sleep, totally protected from the world. It was lovely.
Isn't the Gatwick Express crazy expensive?
I used to bunk the train, and also there's no ticket inspector at 2 a.m.
Life of crime. Right? God, the things you're finding out.
No, because I also refused to buy an adult ticket until I was 18 because I wasn't an adult. It's like I can't drink.
Are you an adult now?
I'm in the eyes of British Transport Police, very much so. I once actually I used to do all sorts of stuff to get out of tickets. I'd hide in toilets. I'd climb under seats. I once fainted to try and get out of it. I just fainted. But I did once see a woman completely outplay me with a ticket inspector. She faked a panic attack, and it was big. She went really, really big with her performance. The guy asked her for a ticket, and she just went, "Oh my God!" And it just went this massive performance. And the guy was, I don't know what to do. And he was like, "Okay, it's fine. And he walked out, and the second he was outside. She was like, "And back again." And,
Wow.
You see, I would have a panic. I couldn't cope with anxiety of not getting a ticket. I'm
Neither
too
could I.
law-abiding. It just wouldn't be worth it. So I'm kind of impressed by how cool you are.
Morally,
Not something I ever thought I'd say.
I used to shoplift really quite a lot as well.
Who even are you?
Yeah, we don't know you at all.
We didn't know you were a
Only-
criminal when we invited you on this show.
I mean, I used to shop. I mean, no, I haven't done it for years. But
What was the best thing you ever shoplifted? Or the one you found?
oh my god, okay, I can't admit that because I was literally about to tell you. There's a really fancy shop in London and a really fancy shop.
Is it the fanciest shop in London?
It's one of the fanciest. And I was in their stationery department. I had no money for my friend's birthday present, but I found these beautiful Christian Lacroix, they're the most decadent, stupid things in the world. They shouldn't exist. That money should have gone to charity. They were like RSVP cards. So when you've been invited to a fancy party, you can RSVP. They were gold, and I was like, I know the campest motherfucker who is going to love these as their birthday present, but I can't buy them. They're 40 quid, and they were just sitting there.
And then they weren't.
So I stole them, and that was last week. No,
This sounds recent.
no. Anyway,
I wondered when you replied to this invitation. I thought that's fancy.
Yeah, where we got an RSVP.
yeah, it arrives on God. So yeah, I stole one of those. But but I was morally incorrect. I was morally correct about the ticket price because I was a child and they were charging me from the age of 15. You're an adult, so they. Why are we talking about this? Anyway, so I used. Yeah, so I'm justifying my criminality, but also we didn't have any money. Like, I used to have to get a train to school every day, and we didn't have enough money for like lunch because we used to have to bunk the ticket to pay for it because I grew up in the 50s. No, I was a working lad. No, anyway, whatever. What am I talking about? We've gone a long way from Gatwick. But I used to sleep there.
I feel like we're already getting into the clearly what is mediocre about you is not your criminal instincts and abilities because they are clearly not mediocre at all. Then
Refuse to be boring. What is mediocre? I mean, there are obviously the things which are mediocre about everyone, but no one should call what they love anything about themselves mediocre because no one. I feel like I don't like.
It's like the phrase guilty pleasure.
Like
I hate that. If you take pleasure, you should not take that whole guilty pleasure music and I hate that. Anyway, sorry.
Also, there's things about cultural things like music and art and literature and like it's all subjective anyway. Like all the music I listen to has a meaning which is completely mine because it's to do with memories. It's to do with where you are in the world, who you are. It's nonsense unless you're a sort of an aficionado. Unless you're a fish. Sorry. Unless you're an aficionado of something, you're an expert in something, then you can have kind of like interest in something. But everything else is subjective, I think. But the idea that mediocre is like on this continuum between like interesting and or like this average in the middle, I think is nonsense. It's a thing in itself. Was separate from any sort of like. I just think things are. I don't believe in binaries or like what's that word from one end to one end? Spectrums. Yeah. It's all different things. It's all lots of blobs all over the place, and people have different identities and lots of different blobs, and they make them up. And the idea that somebody would say anything that they liked was bland or mediocre is, I don't necessarily like. Things that I would probably call things basically I don't like about myself because they're quite boring. Like I really like audiobooks. My favourite book is a sort of trashy gay book, which I would love to give a shout out to because it's wonderful. It's called. Have you ever heard of The Object of My Affection by Stephen Macaulay? Oh, it's so bad. It's not bad. It's just really kind of like it's just a lovely. It's like a friend rom-com, and they made a film of it in the 90s, which was terrible because they rewrote the whole story with Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd in, I think, one of his only gay roles as unconvincing gay man.
Because we couldn't possibly cast a gay man to do
Nigel Hawthorne's in it as well. Sorry.
One of our friends writes gay
Yes.
love
Two
fiction.
actually, Helen and Ed both do.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the right terminology is
to
for
date
it.
someone who does that. What's his name?
So it's Helen Juliet writes erotic. I was going to say man on man, and I'm sure
But
it's
it's called like
M2M.
MM.
MM
yeah.
fiction, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I love it.
You
There's a
should look her
bookshop
up,
in
it's
LA
really good.
called...
It's really good. And Ed, and I've forgotten his last name, which is awful of me, but Ed does as well. He does a lot of trans rom fiction as well, I think. Yeah, we'll share
There
links.
is a bookshop in... I love romantic fiction. There's this bookshop in LA which does... which is just a romance bookshop. I think I might have made this up. It might be called Romancing the Bone, but I think that might be wrong.
If not, then let's open a bookshop and call it
Called
that.
Romancing the Bone. Yeah. And it's just romance novels. And I went in there and I found they had this massive LGBT section, and I just bought all these like super, super ridiculous kind of... Oh, they had such good names. Yeah.
Amazing.
But genuinely, I don't think anyone should call them anything about themselves mediocre. And there is that thing which all therapists tell you, and you do have to learn to love yourself and be okay with being kind of in the middle. But I think that only works if you see everything from my perspective. If everything is like a sort of like linear kind of like the top and the bottom, you're either great or you're bad. But like, I think trying to get away from some idea of mediocrity of that kind of like spectrum at all is probably where you need to be. Like, why?
Can I ask what the fear about being boring is? Why is that the thing that you keep coming back to?
I think I had a really boring upbringing, and I was always I wasn't very funny when I was growing up. I wasn't very interested. I was a very weird child. I genuinely was a very weird. I know I talk about this all the time.
You're quite a weird adult as well.
I'm not actually that much of a weird adult. I don't think so. I think I'm quite. I don't think I'm that weird. Now I'm just thinking about all the weird things I do. I mean, yeah, no, I think I give off strange energy, but I don't like dress. I dress particularly. I'm quite boring in that respect. I don't know. What was your question? Sorry.
I was going to ask, this is going to be a ridiculous question. It's impossible for you to answer, so I'll ask it anyway. But I'm just wondering about that fear of boring, because, and this is one of the themes of your show, David, but growing up gay, because there's such an expectation of being what you call the big gay character, and you have to be extra and you have to be seen as fabulous, because that's what we've pictured. And so growing up gay, if worrying that if you're not that, and if you don't feel like you're that, then are you anything? And
when you saw the show, did that speak to you?
Yeah, completely. Like, yeah, well, not the sort of like the big character. I think just being aware of performance and being aware of who you are. I think actually I find gay identity quite useful because it's a good shield you can hide behind in awkward situations. Like the performance of sort of like queer archetype. But yeah, I don't really know. I feel I would be very, very interested. I think obviously queerness affects everything. Your gayness affects absolutely every aspect of my life, and I was completely warped by that. And I don't think that's
I am so grateful to hear you say that, because I feel like so often we hear people say, "Oh, you know, I don't want to be defined by my sexuality, or it's just one part of me." And I experience the world the way I do because I grew up as a gay kid, and like it influences my interactions with everything in the world. How, like, when I sit on the bus, when I walk down the road, when we meet the guy who opens the studio, like everything about my life is influenced by being queer. And I find it really difficult when I hear gay or straight people, but particularly men, who are like, "Oh, it doesn't, you know, it's only one part of them," when it is only one part of me, but it's affected everything.
Yeah. That I think that's complete. I think it's also that I think we're in a bad. I think the terminology needs to change as well about what actually. Specifically, I think I think focusing on my own experience about sort of like gayness for gay men, that the term homosexual, for example, needs to just go away, because like that's specifically about sort of a sex act, and a sex act, or the sex. You can tell I haven't had sex in a while. What were we talking about? The sex? No,
like the being gay.
Yeah, the being gay. There's like a. There needs to be something else, because it's almost just like, well, it's just who you love. It's like, it's not about who I love, it's about who I am.
It's why one of the things I said, so about 18 months ago, I stopped describing myself as a gay man, and I now describe myself as queer, because I feel like a gay man describes, in theory, who I have sex with, but queer describes the fact that that's how I live my life, that my life is lived not in the norm, influenced by the fact of who, in theory, I am supposed to have sex with. Well, I've made that sound so weird.
Are you trying to tell us, David, that it's been a while?
Let's not go there.
On count of 3, let's say how long. No. Let's all say how long it's been since we had sex.
I'd rather not. Are we measuring in like months or years now? But yeah, like that's why I feel like I agree. There isn't quite the right terminology. So that's why I don't generally describe myself, or tend not to describe myself as gay anymore. I think queer covers the fact that like this is how I live my life. I really try and spend as little time interacting with straight people as possible.
Yeah, and just
Hi, any straight people that are watching or listening.
Yeah, we love you and would like you to buy merch.
So much. Buy merch
You're
and
all,
tickets.
shows.
You are all great allies.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Brilliant.
Actually, no, I think the queer thing is really interesting. I know, I try and say queer a lot more now, but mainly just because I think like gay. I once was at Pride and someone was saying that like queer was a terrible term. I had a therapist tell me that queer was pretentious.
Pretentious.
A really bad therapist.
Please tell me you changed therapist. Yes.
Yeah. I ditched. He was a CBT therapist. I think it was his first kind of like couple of years of practicing. But my God. He was like, yeah, it's a bit pretentious, isn't it, to call yourself queer? I was like, fuck you. But multiple people in the LGBT plus community say that don't like the term because it's like a political thing.
Yeah.
And I remember proving everyone wrong by saying, well, gay is also like I think there's also like a gendered element with gay because most people assume when you say gay that you're talking about gay men.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's not true. So I went up to a straight person and was just like, can you name me 3 stereotypes about gay people? And they were like rainbow flags, drag queens. And I can't think of another example. They just named a load of shit about gay men. And I was like, haha.
Whereas queer is much more gender inclusive.
Yeah, because it's like
And it. I had to form this in my head before I thought, but I think because sexuality is much more open. I think there's a lot of straight people who are much more open to try having different sexual experiences. That to me feels, which is great, fantastic. I'm not knocking that, but that feels different to growing up queer and being queer. And I mean, I've come to it later in life and realised that I was, but it is, which has been a very different experience, and I'm very conscious of that. I've had a lot of straight privilege in my life, and still do because I pass, right? But
same.
But I think there's a.
Sorry, I didn't.
I was going to say funniest joke you have ever made.
I'm sorry, that wasn't meant to stamp on
I
your
was being
speech.
so profound and sensitive, and that was intelligent.
Michael heard a joke, the best
To
joke
be
he's ever
fair,
made.
I need that validation.
Yeah, but yes, but I think there is I think to your point, there is a. Obviously, I've lost it now, has it? But there is a thing that it's great that people are much more open sexually to the experience, but that is different to growing and being a queer person.
We have spoken to a number of people recently, not on the podcast, but like in life, where they are of the belief that like the need for an identity and the coming out and things like that is really unimportant, and I just find it really difficult to hold that thought because it's such. I don't understand how it can not be important when it's such an enormous part of my life. When even somebody saying, "Oh, I don't think you should have to come out anymore," I really understand the sentiment. I really do. But when it was something that was so enormous for me, and I consider it really important. Like in my previous life, I ran a number of businesses and things like that, and I felt it was really important for me to be very openly gay and to be very open with all of my staff about the fact that I was, because I was in a position of power and authority. I really wanted them to have that example. And so I don't really buy into this, people should, you don't need to talk about it. I'd really like to get to the point where people don't see it. Because when we were kids, and I'm very conscious of the fact that we are very similar ages, you're much older.
I'm
than
21.
When we were kids.
Oh, but it's been a hard life.
When we were kids, because we were born like in literally the same year, I think. And it was the same with Jeremy. There was very few examples of people either in our own lives or on TV or like in positions of power or anything like that you really knew about. There was a lot of people that people spoke about, but there wasn't that many people that were out and that you could really look up to, and there was only very extreme examples.
There's a really interesting book which I would like to plug by Will
Odette.
There's a really interesting book which I'd like to plug by Will Odette. It's got a terrible name. It's called Out of the Shadows, which sounds really kind of like crap, but it's a gay psychology book. It's kind of like so you've read The Velvet Rage. Other readers have also bought Straight Jacket and this book. This book I discovered just randomly in Gay's the Word, and it is magnificent. And what he describes is the sort of like different generations of gay men, specifically as like pandemic gay men who experienced the pandemic. We're talking about the OG pandemic, and then the sort of like. Then there's this kind of middle generation, which is what we belong to, which is the men who experienced the sort of didn't experience it directly, but experienced the trauma, the aftermath, and the whole kind of like no sex and shame and death and nightmare and all that stuff. And then there's the sort of people who have just no experience of that, sort of the next generation. And we have to be very careful that we're actually living with multiple generations of gay men. So people have different identities all the time. Like lots and lots of gay men who are a bit older who are in that pandemic generation, totally different experience of everything. And we might have sort of like a different conception of like gay men sort of like identity, but it's going to be totally different to somebody who didn't have that kind of like. I also just think I'm trying to think less about trauma. Trying to sort of like we all have these traumatic youthful experiences, and to think that denotes kind of like a universal experience of gayness, which it doesn't anymore. Where's my point? So we've gone so far from mediocrity. I think
it was a very good point. I think that's really interesting, and it's something I know you've talked about before about those different generations and finding the ways their connections through that, and the needing to learn from history, but not, I guess, as always, held back. And
I mean, one of the things I think is fascinating is like the generation above us, the older ones from us. Like, there's a lot fewer of them. Not all of them lived. I very often, when we are at the dancing, I very often pick up on the fact that like some of the younger kids will be like, moan about getting old, and I really try and consciously not moan about getting old, because I think as a gay man, it's a privilege. Old, because there's a whole group of people that didn't get to, and I'm just super conscious of the
Billy
fact
Porter
that,
talked about that.
Yeah, and like we know a lot, like where there's not like they don't have their friends, you know, and it's that different generation experience, you know.
And Billy Porter talked when he was over doing Pride in London. He was saying that he's a few years older than me, I think, but the first generation that he was in, they could be out and proud and joyful, but they're the first generation to then get olders who've been out most of their lives.
Yeah.
And what yes, it's a privilege, but it's a very specific experience. Yeah. And it's very easy to take that for granted.
Anyway, that was really interesting, Michael. Thank you. What are you promoting? Where can we find you?
Just me. Just find me.
Just in the streets.
I will be hiding.
Grindr.
You have to find me.
You'll definitely be on Grindr.
Do you remember that Smack the Pony sketch, which was... I don't know why I decided to end with it. I would like to promote Smack the Pony. If anyone remembers that from the late 90s, early 2000s. And there was a woman... They used to do these dating videos.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it was the woman's just like I can disassemble like the Kalashnikov in 5 seconds.
Oh my God.
Like...
a very age-specific reference again.
You can message me. Yeah, your first mission, find me. I completely garbled that. But anyway, yes. I am just, my name is really unique, Michael Cumes, so I'm really Googleable. So
Cumes is spelled Cumes.
Yes, it's like comes.
And what?
Comes with an E.
What do you want?
When you give me an E, I can't come. It's a weird thing. Who can come when they're on ecstasy?
It's impossible.
So we're going to have to
My
put an
dick
over 18.
vanishes.
We're going to have to put an over 18 thing on this now because of this ending comment. What is your username on Instagram?
At Michael Cumes. There is no one else called Michael Cumes on Instagram, I think, which is really cool. The actor in LA whose emails I sometimes get. No, he's not an actor. He's unemployed.
Actor,
isn't that most actors?
Well, I think he's stopped being an actor now. I sort of follow his. I think he now works at kind of Universal Studios or something as like a manager or something.
Oh.
I think that's fine. He gets to live in LA. I love LA, so they've got a really good romantic bookshop.
Okay, good, amazing.
Sorry, I took us really off to.
Good. Thank you for coming.
That's been
really good.
really enjoyed that, Michael. That's
and whether all your other guests you've said, we've got to have you on again.
And we're like, thanks for coming.
Don't let the door hit you on your way
We will
out.
have you again, Michael. You've got lots to say. Right.
Just mainly about Javine.
Thanks for listening, everybody. You can find me on Instagram at Mr. David Ian.
And you can find me at KTS Dale.
And we'll catch you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Mediocre Gay, the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps other people find the show.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Mediocre Gay Pod, or share your mediocre secrets with us on mediocregaypod@gmail.com.